At approximately 6:47 a.m., Ukrainian forces initiated a complex, multi-domain operation targeting one of Russia's most valuable military assets on the outskirts of Moscow, the Borisogledsk II Electronic Warfare (EW) Center. This sprawling installation, valued at an estimated $4.5 billion, anchors a significant portion of the regional radar and signals intelligence web supporting Moscow's defensive architecture. Its neutralization represented not just a tactical blow, but a strategic attempt to fracture the command mesh that links numerous sensor and communication grids across central Russia. The opening phase of the assault unfolded as a coordinated aerial probe. Swarms of Ukrainian unmanned systems, ranging from FPV-type loitering munitions to mid-range fixed-wing reconnaissance aircraft, approached the facility simultaneously from several azimuths. Their purpose was twofold: to map the center's digital infrastructure and to disrupt the interlocking networks connecting it to Russia's wider sensor architecture. Each class of drone carried out a specialized task. Punisher strike drones flew low-altitude passes, matching terrain contours in order to chart the routing of above-ground and shallow-buried fiber optic corridors. Higher above, UJ-26 reconnaissance platforms traced crucial uplink paths, pinpointing satellites, relay stations, and microwave towers feeding the complex. Other UAVs equipped with electronically scanned array (ESA) systems swept the compound's interior to search for the data processing core thought to sit at its center. Supporting this swarm was a protective screen of Ukrainian Su-27 fighters operating at altitude, along with attack helicopters patrolling lateral approach corridors. Their mission was not to conduct strikes, but to shield the unmanned assets from Russian interceptors. While the aerial layer engaged, Ukrainian reconnaissance teams on the ground initiated the electronic assault. Panther-type robotic platforms crept along forest lines and drainage trenches, identifying isolated repeater towers destined for later kinetic targeting. FPV teams moved through transmission corridors, visually isolating the bundles of signal lines that formed the facility's circulatory system. Moments later, portable Ukrainian EW jammers activated, unleashing a potent wave of interference, finely tuned to the facility's operating bands. Within minutes, Russian operators inside Borisogledsk II reported flickering command links, intermittent voice channels, and random losses of data throughput. The electronic barrage created large blind spots in the Russian sensor grid, effectively quarantining the site before a single kinetic strike touched it. Meanwhile, mechanized Ukrainian units, including T-64BV main battle tanks, waited just outside visual range in concealed hull-down positions. The tanks formed a mobile reserve capable of exploiting any local collapse in Russian situational awareness. Infantry squads established perimeter screens closely synced to live drone feeds. The Russian response came swiftly. In the sector surrounding the EW center, Buk M3 surface-to-air missile launchers rotated to track incoming signatures while Pantsir S two-point defense systems activated their acquisition radars. Higher overhead, Russian MiG-29 fighters scrambled alongside Mi-28 attack helicopters tasked with hunting down reconnaissance drones. Despite this flurry of activity, the early contest remained largely invisible, a duel of sensor against counter-sensor, frequency against interference, algorithm against spoofing. With the initial jamming wave establishing the needed conditions, Ukrainian forces escalated into the kinetic phase. From staging grounds roughly 30 miles out, M142 HIMARS batteries and M270 systems launched volleys of precision-guided rockets. The targets were deliberately selective: power nodes, communication pylons, cooling stations, routing hubs, and radar substations essential to the operational continuity of Borisogledsk II. The objective was less about destruction and more about dismembering the system, cutting tendons, not smashing bone. As the first rockets struck, Punisher drones switched roles. Now operating in coordinated pairs, they dived on Russian convoys, attempting to reinforce the area, severing resupply routes, and forcing troops to disperse. On the ground, robotic mine-laying vehicles moved through culverts and shallow ditches, deploying sensor-triggered anti-vehicle mines intended to slow Russian armored counterattacks or divert them into more predictable corridors. Under this umbrella, T-64BV tanks began advancing, using folds in the terrain and smoke from earlier strikes to conceal their movement. Remarkably, these tanks also served as improvised mobile signal hubs, relaying targeting data to waves of incoming FPV loitering munitions. Above the field, Su-27 fighters maintained a patrol at roughly 18,000 feet, using their specialized radar pods to compile a dynamic, three-dimensional map of active Russian emitters. That mapping data was streamed into the drone swarm, enabling near-instant triangulation of any transmitter that came online. Once identified, these emitters were struck by cluster-type mini-munitions dropped from Punisher drones. The results were precise: antennas shredded, exposed systems short-circuited, and mobile shelters reduced to smoldering remains. Russia's countermeasures escalated. Satellite reconnaissance indicated the ignition signatures of Iskander tactical ballistic missile launchers. Their subsequent launches appeared intended to suppress Ukrainian staging areas rather than directly defend the EW complex. Within the airspace, Zala drones and Lancet loitering munitions hunted Ukrainian control vehicles, while deeper inside Russian lines, Zhetel R-330 ECM stations spun up, attempting to project concentric anti-communication fields to disrupt Ukrainian coordination, but Ukrainian EW units adapted more rapidly than Russian automation could counter. Their jammers shifted frequencies with aggressive hopping sequences, outrunning Russian tracking algorithms. HIMARS batteries continued systematic strikes, increasingly targeting secondary infrastructure, fuel stores, backup servers, and cooling systems vital to sustaining large radar arrays. Within half an hour of the kinetic phase beginning, estimates suggested the facility's electronic output had dimmed by more than 50%. Burning transmitters, disabled optic nodes, and collapsed communication masts littered the area. Following the primary strikes, the battlefield shifted once again into an invisible domain, an intense contest in the electromagnetic spectrum. Ukrainian EW UAVs began releasing swarms of micro-emitters, tiny pod-based devices broadcasting false radar signatures in a 10-mile radius. On Russian scopes, these appeared as phantom armor columns, false convoys, and non-existent drone swarms. The deception extended to the ground, where mobile EW trucks and inflatable decoy arrays generated a dense, multi-layered electronic fog. Advanced Russian systems such as the Nebo-M radar network found their screens overwhelmed by static, ghost returns, and contradictory telemetry. Meanwhile, Ukrainian command links remained stable and encrypted. Signals intelligence crews relied on millisecond interval frequency hopping, staying far ahead of Russian trace and jam routines. The conflict pivoted from physical destruction to cognitive dominance, depriving Russian commanders of the ability to observe, orient, decide, and act. Russian engineers scrambled to reroute data through backup fiber channels. Damaged ECM systems were rebooted at partial power in desperate attempts to restore outward jamming fields. For brief intervals, visibility returned to pockets of the Russian grid, only for Ukrainian counter-jamming to collapse them again. Su-27s served as vital airborne relays, knitting together data from ground units, unmanned assets, and artillery platforms. With Russian situational awareness flickering, Ukrainian commanders initiated a limited mechanized ground assault. This was not a brute force storming, but a carefully controlled advance designed to exploit the pre-established electronic superiority. T-64 BVS pushed forward in a staggered spearhead, following routes scouted earlier by drones and ground robots. Infantry squads advanced behind them, using gaps in Russian sensor coverage like stepping stones. Ukrainian artillery and HIMARS batteries continued shaping the battlefield, targeting hardened firing points and cutting off resupply attempts. The guiding principle remained consistent: degrade, isolate, then occupy. Russian defenders mounted determined resistance. T-90M tanks established hardened firing positions, while Mi-28 helicopters circled to deny Ukrainian armor easy approaches. Small Russian counterattacks attempted to channel Ukrainian forces into kill zones, but these were met with rapid Ukrainian repositioning supported by real-time drone intelligence. Inside the broader network, Russian ECM units fought to reassemble a functioning command grid. Operators spliced cables by hand, activated short-range repeaters, and aired backup antennas in improvised arrays. The battle increasingly resembled a multi-layered chess match, each move countered by an electronic reply. By the time Ukrainian engineers secured forward nodes, the outer perimeter of Boris-Oglebsk II had been functionally gutted of reliable routing. The operation did not intend to annihilate the garrison, but to methodically unravel the system link by link, leaving Russian forces reliant on ad hoc, vulnerable communication networks. The cascading effects of disabling Boris-Oglebsk II extended well beyond the immediate battlefield. The disruption of this routing hub forced Russian air defense sectors around Moscow to reorganize abruptly. SAM units were relocated dozens of miles to compensate for perceived holes in radar coverage. Logistical operations slowed as convoys were halted for manual verification due to unreliable communication. Backup headquarters flooded with contradictory data, issuing overlapping or outdated orders. The once cohesive command mesh frayed into isolated pockets with uneven visibility. Ukrainian forward teams exploited this fragmentation. They moved rapidly to secure reserve depots and telemetry caches, retrieving electronic logs and encrypted equipment to prevent rapid Russian reconstruction. Wheeled robots inspected relay cabinets for recoverable components, while drones sifted through surviving sensor feeds for intelligence. Russia's defensive posture became reactive and localized. MiG-29 patrols and Pantsir batteries condensed into tight bubbles of coverage, leaving large swaths underprotected. Mobile command vans replaced fixed command posts, but this improvisation stretched resources thin. Throughout the operation, Ukrainian units reportedly adhered to humanitarian protocols, maintaining cleared medical corridors and broadcasting safe passage advisories where possible. After several hours of sustained electronic attrition and precision strikes, both sides began to stabilize their positions. Ukrainian units consolidated control over compromised network nodes before withdrawing many mobile assets to safer staging areas. Combat engineers deployed retrieval robots to catalog damaged electronics and ensure no volatile systems remained active. Russian crews, meanwhile, regrouped among the damaged infrastructure, erecting temporary command shelters and cautiously restoring limited communication links. By first light, the battlefield had quieted. The Ukrainian objective had been met. Borysoglebsk, too, was electronically blinded, its primary command channel severed, and its contribution to Moscow's regional defense network drastically diminished. What followed was a deep systemic silence, a once cohesive network now reduced to fragments requiring slow, costly reconstruction. The operation demonstrated a critical truth of modern warfare. Disabling a system node can be as decisive as destroying a frontline formation. Whether Russia can restore its former defensive fluidity remains an open question. The cascading shocks delivered by this non-lethal but highly precise operation may have permanently reshaped Moscow's protective architecture.